fancier and fancier technology every time. Thank you, Manakam. So welcome everyone to today's session. For anyone who wasn't here last time, my name is Anna and I've been a student of the founder and spiritual guide of the Tibetan Buddhist Society, Venerable Geshe, Acharya, Thubten, Loden for many years. He's the gentleman directly behind me, and I was ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist nun in 2006. So this course is primarily aimed at finding ways to nurture our own Buddha potential, which the Buddha said we all had. And the Buddha investigated and found in his investigations of the mind that we can all achieve a state of perfect happiness and a perfectly happy state of mind. So this session includes a talk, guided meditations, and if there's time, there'll be an opportunity for questions as well. So the course draws on this peerless reference text, The Path to Enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism, which was written by the great Tibetan spiritual guide and teacher, Venerable Geshe Acharya Thubten Loden. It's a compendium of Buddhist practice. It's a reference book. It's a great guide to how to make our mind much happier and to reach an enlightened state eventually. So it's a wonderful guide, something that we can use every single day, and if we apply these teachings, there is absolutely no doubt that our mind will ripen, and our ability to achieve our own potential will definitely occur through the study and working through this book. That is just unquestioned. So Geshe Loden, he first began his studies as a monk at the age of 7 against having a very reluctant family. They weren't particularly keen on him becoming a monk. They wanted him to follow into the family's trade. But he went off to a monastery where his uncle was already established, and step by step he then began the great studies of Tibetan Buddhism, first in the village monastery, then in a slightly larger monastery, and eventually in the great monasteries of Tibet in Lhasa, in the capital Lhasa. And then after the incursions by the Chinese and many Tibetans left, he then continued his studies, finished his studies some 40 or 50 years later from his very beginning in the re-established monasteries in India. So we begin each session of a Path to Enlightenment course with prayers, and as we go through the course, the meaning of the prayers will become clearer and clearer for those who aren't already familiar with these prayers. And I would again encourage you to memorise them if you are so inclined, because the meaning becomes even clearer then. So let's start the prayers. The first prayer is on page 19. So we'll do the first prayer in English, and then the next two we'll do in Tibetan and English on page 19. Then after that we'll go to page 23 to do the prayer of the lineage gurus, and we'll do that in English, and then we'll do the great Treasury of Excellence on 27 again in English. So, Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly pure and complete Buddha, all-knowing, having poise, Sagata, apprehender of the world, navigator of beings to be subdued, incomparable, teacher of gods and humans, to the Buddha, the Bhagavan, the glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. And the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Sanghichodang Zokichonam La Jang Chubarudani Gyab Suji Dage Jinzogi Pezonanji Drola Panji Sange Drupajo. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. So then we do the short mandala offering, and there is a mudra. I'll try and show it from here. So you put your thumb on your little finger, like so, and then you put the middle finger or the third finger along up like a mountain. So you're holding back with the thumb and the little finger, and then you cross the other two fingers like that. So that's the mudra for offering. Mount Meru and the four continents. Saji Poki Jujin Metodram Rirab Lingjinire Gyan Pari Sangye Jindu Minge Ulvaji Drukun Nam Dag Jinla Chopajo. This ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, Mount Meru, the four continents, adorned with sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. Then we turn to page 23, or on your screen. Body born from a million magnificent, excellent virtues, speech fulfilling the hopes of infinite beings, a mind that sees all objects of knowledge precisely, I bow my head to the chief among the Shakyas, supreme sons of the incomparable teacher, carrying the load of all the conqueror's deeds by their emanations appearing in countless realms. I prostrate to Maitreya and Manjushri. The mother of conquerors is difficult to fathom. The precise thought is in commentaries written by Jambudvipa's ornaments, Nagarjuna and Asanga. I prostrate at the feet of those most renowned in the three realms. From these two great chariots come the excellent lineages of the paths of profound view and vast deeds, their essential points gathered thoroughly and without fault. Prostration to the Lamb holding this treasury of instruction, giving explanation through compassion by seeing precisely and completely the essential points of all paths of Sutra and Tantra, holder of the Conqueror's entire holy Dharma, prostrations to the glorious Losang Drakpa. I, seeing all the infinite teachings, supreme way of crossing for those entering the journey to liberation, moved by compassion to deeds skilled in method, prostrations to the spiritual masters who make everything clear. Then we change to page 27. great treasury of excellence, the prayer of the path to enlightenment. The kind master is the basis of all qualities, and proper reliance is the root of the path. By seeing this excellence and through much striving, bestow blessings to be devoted with great respect. This gentle support of freedom obtained this one time is most difficult to achieve. Knowing its great value gives rise to a mind seizing its essence constantly day and night. Bestow blessings to generate this continuum unceasingly. It is like a bubble in water, this constantly moving body and life. Thus remember the swift collapse of death. Beyond death, like body and shadow, white and black karmic results follow after. By gaining firm certainty in this, the massive faults, subtle and very subtle, of all virtuous collections completed, bestow blessings to ever retain conscientiousness. The qualities of samsara are unfit to be trusted. The door to all suffering. Do not be content with these enjoyments. By knowing its defects, bestow blessings to develop a great aspiration for the bliss of liberation. By that pure thought, great conscientiousness is drawn forth, and mindfulness and awareness of the individual liberation, the root of the teachings. Bestow blessings to make this the essential practice. Just as I myself have fallen into samsara's ocean, all living beings as mother are also like that. By seeing the responsibility for the liberation of beings, bestow blessings to be trained in supreme bodhicitta. However, by merely generating the mind, if not acquainted with the three aspects of ethics, enlightenment will not be attained. By seeing this excellence, bestow blessings to train with strong effort in the vows of conquerors' sons, pacifying distraction toward perverse objects by way of proper analysis of the perfect meaning. Bestow blessings to swiftly and continuously generate the path related to the union of calm abiding and special insight. Thus, becoming a vessel trained in the common paths, enter the Vajrayana, supreme evolution of all vehicles. Bestow blessings to engage the easy path itself, that sacred way of crossing for fortunate beings. The base of practice for the two aspects of attainment is when guarding the pure vows of commitment is found to be genuine and certain. Bestow blessings to protect them even at risk of life. Then, by understanding properly the important points, which are the essence of the two stages of the Tantra classes, bestow blessings to practice according to these holy teachings, with continuous effort in the supreme four-session yoga. Like that, may the spiritual friend revealing the gentle path and the friends of proper practice stand firm. Bestow blessings to quickly pacify the masses of outer and inner hindrances. In all rebirths, may I never be parted from perfect gurus and the enjoyment of the glorious Dharma. By utterly completing all qualities, paths and grounds, may I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara. So we'll now do some breathing meditation to settle into the class and settle into the present moment. So first get ourselves nice and comfortable. The main thing, whether we're on the floor or whether we're on a chair, is to have a nice straight back. There's no need to attempt the lotus. If we're on the floor, easy, cross legs is fine. So we take a deep breath, raise our shoulders and then let them relax with a sigh. And we'll let the body soften and relax. Not too relaxed, not too tight, beautifully in between. So we either close our eyes if we're able to do that, or half close our eyes and bend our head slightly forward, placing the tongue behind the front teeth to prevent the build-up of saliva. Rest our hands in the lap, the right hand on top of the left and the tips of the thumbs touching. So we begin by developing a good motivation. So with the minds of love and compassion that are feeling uneasy about the continued suffering of our friends and family, everyone in different places, and all other living beings, we develop a motivation for our practice of listening, thinking and meditating today. We think in order to support the development of happiness and to benefit all living beings, quickly, I must gain these qualities towards achieving the precious state of perfect awakening. So therefore I shall focus on my meditations, bring all my concentration to my meditations and to listening about the graduated path to enlightenment. Established our motivation, I'll move our concentration to the sensation of the breath as it enters and leaves the body. Choose the place that you prefer, the rising and falling of the diaphragm, or as it leaves and enters the nostrils, whichever feels most comfortable for you. For this short time, we gently discard all other thoughts that arise, all memories, everything that happened in the last hour, everything that happened this morning, last night, all our plans for the rest of the week or for the future ahead, all of our worries and daydreams, any sensations, tingles and feelings. With the aim to develop a mind of spaciousness and serenity, just by gently focusing on the breath. Meditation is a learned skill like any other. Resolve will step by step bring results. A small part of the mind, we keep the watch out for any distraction. We label them as distraction and bring the mind back to the rising and falling or the in and out of the breath. To assist our focus, we can think, I am breathing in and I am breathing out. I am breathing in and I am breathing out. we find that we're becoming a little sleepy or a little dull, we make an extra effort to sharpen our attention. If the sleepiness or dullness is overwhelming, we open our eyes for a second or two and then return as quickly as possible to our focus on the breath. The twin enemies of our meditation are agitation or excitement and dullness. But we needn't worry if we're experiencing these aspects of dullness or a busy mind, because all the time that we're trying, we're making progress. We are creating an imprint for future success. We are working to overcome the obstacles and defeat the enemies of agitation and dullness. We fully focus on this one object, the breath. This time is very precious. This time is for us to focus on developing our mind. We aim for light and natural. We experience thoughts and feelings and sensations. We let them go. Our goal is to become very still. The thoughts that we might have are just that, just thoughts. No beginning and no end. They are empty of inherent existence, with no shred of materiality nor truth. They are just perspectives. We can let them dissolve and disappear, like a rainbow disappearing on the horizon. Or drops of snow melting on the land as they reach the ground. As they gently disappear into the ether, we bring our mind back softly, but as quickly as possible, to the rising and falling or inner and outer movement of the breath, gradually cultivating that inner calm, the inner sense of peace, the stability, So when you're ready, if you like to release your concentration. So the name of the first 6 weeks, just to recap from last week, first 6 weeks of this Path to Enlightenment course is finding happiness from within. Because a core feature of Tibetan Buddhism is that we are fully able to find greater happiness regardless of our circumstances and our situation. So finding more happiness relies on our inner settings and is not dependent on our external situations at all. Life, of course, can be a little bit easier if our world is especially bountiful, or if we're just getting by, and be a little bit harder if we're just getting by and life is a struggle. But this is not the determinant factor of our happiness, and there are many examples of people who have very bountiful experiences and are not so happy, and the reverse of people who have very, very little and who are very, very happy. So clearly that is not the determinant. So our happiness is in fact our choice. And the Buddhist thought suggests that the activity of finding happiness acknowledges the rare opportunity that we are experiencing in this life and the ability to better help ourselves and others. So we can actually make that choice to be happy. Having made this decision, if we do find that we're not so happy, then of course there needs to be some investigation to determine why that is the case. And maybe it's because we have way too much on in our lives and we're really tired a lot of the time and we need a rest. Maybe there are strong habits that are holding us back, that are causing a lot of difficulties. Maybe our whole approach to the world and our perspective needs some review. Maybe we need to develop more positive qualities such as patience and compassion or wisdom. The reality is that each of us has our own story. So there is no one story for every single person. Everyone will have their own story and their own journey to uncover what is going on if they're not experiencing the kind of happiness and peace and contentment and stability that they would really like to have. So this happiness and deep satisfaction and contentment, they come from stability, the ability to remain steady and to help ourselves regardless of what is going on, whether the waters around us are very calm or whether the waters around us are very stormy. So we can compare it to like a giant ocean liner that is really having to navigate all the great oceans, and sometimes it will be extremely choppy. That is the nature of our lives, is that sometimes it's very choppy and we're having to deal with lots of obstacles, and at other times it can seem quite easy and peaceful. So a patient, loving and peaceful and compassionate approach is a great place to start. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that the ultimate source of a happy life is warm-heartedness. Even animals display some sense of compassion. When it comes to human beings, compassion can be combined with intelligence. And then through the application of reason, compassion can then be extended to all of the 7 billion human beings, His Holiness said. Destructive emotions are related to ignorance, while compassion is helpful and related to intelligence. So consequently, the takeout from that, His Holiness says, is that compassion and warm-heartedness can be taught and learned. So that's the basis, he says, of a happy mind, is a warm heart. So how we achieve that continuous warm-heartedness is really the basis of the Dharma and the basis of these teachings. So Geshe Loden describes the teachings of, so that leads us to the question of what is Dharma. So Geshe Loden says that the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha are called the Dharma, and it is one of the 3 jewels in which Buddhists take refuge, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. And so what happens is that we, in Buddhist practice, in the Path to Enlightenment practice, we make a decision that we would like to be happy and that we want to renounce all forms of suffering. So we want to renounce all of our suffering, We want to renounce the suffering of beings who are having a particularly difficult time, such as the lower realms, and we also want to renounce the suffering of all other living beings. So we ourselves have been experiencing different forms of unhappiness and suffering, and we know what that's like, and we don't want it. That's the case also for other living beings. So we take refuge in, or we may take refuge, we may make a decision to take refuge and say that the pathway out of this suffering is as taught by the Buddha, by Shakyamuni Buddha, and through the teachings of the Dharma and through the support of the Sangha. The Sangha being those who have reached a certain place and a certain understanding, as opposed, it can be, as I think I mentioned last week, it can be non-ordained people or ordained people, reach a certain level of realizations. So we might also come across the term Dharma in other places as well. For example, in Hinduism, Dharma is described as the religious and moral law governing good conduct. In Theravadan Buddhism, one renowned teacher whose name was Walpola Rahula, writing in the early 1970s, described it as Dharma is the nature of what is, the truth of what the Buddha taught. So not particularly different to the understanding that we have in Tibetan Buddhism. So the Dharma that is taught in Tibetan Buddhism is also based on the notion that we are all equal. And Geshe explains that on page 31 of the Path to Enlightenment. He says that all beings are equal in the following respect. At a fundamental level, everything we do is part of our quest for happiness and well-being. But by seeking this in worldly pursuits, we succeed in creating more and more suffering. So there's quite a few parts to this theory, and through the Dharma teachings explained in the Path to Enlightenment, we can explore the meaning. So what the Dharma does is it shows us what the Buddhist teaching shows us is what is really going on in our minds and how to change that. So the Buddha himself began by teaching the Four Noble Truths. He talked about the truth of suffering, talked about the true cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the true path to the end of suffering. In simple terms, that means that suffering exists, and we all know that suffering exists. It has a cause, it has an end, and it has a cause to bring about its end. And that's quite remarkable. So there is actually a way through this. So the exact nature of sufferings will be explained in detail in future classes. And for those of you who have already read The Path to Enlightenment, you will recall that there's a lot of detailed explanation of what the sufferings are exactly. If you would like to have a read earlier, if anyone who's not so familiar with the book and would like to read earlier about what the various sufferings are, I suggest you read chapter 13 on page 389. And you might also want to read chapter 14 on the delusions or negative minds. So in the meantime, we can focus on dealing with our experience of agitation. And most of us experience gross agitation at some times. Sometimes we experience gross agitation, great difficulty with agitation. And we're always pretty much experiencing subtle agitation, pervasive pervasive suffering. We rarely experience any really deep mental peace or happiness due to these gross and subtle negative minds, is what Geshe explains in The Path to Enlightenment. And whether or not we understand the process of how that happens, we don't really like that situation at all. So our behaviours show that we naturally don't like this situation. And this is why we continuously search and look for new ways to find the peace and the contentment that we all crave. So many parts of our lives are like that. So many different parts of our lives, we're looking for a new way to feel more settled, to feel more peaceful. So, just as an example, it could be all sorts of things, but, you might buy a new house, then it needs a renovation. Once the renovation is done, maybe we should move closer to the city, into a better street. Then I love my time in the inner city. now I need more land, so let's move back to the suburbs, or maybe even better into the country. So that's the kind of thinking that goes with it. I read an article the other day about a very wealthy young couple who had just finished, not long finished, kind of Vogue-like renovation of a multi-million-dollar house in Turak, and they'd also just finished renovating their incredible house with the most amazing views and pools and all the rest of it in Noosa, and now they've decided to sell both of them and find a new house on the northern beaches of Sydney, because that would be better for some reason, having invested all that time and energy and money in creating these other two beautiful places. So will it stop there? Who knows? I mean, maybe it will. Maybe they'll be happy there and that'll be the final stop, but that's a space that we can watch. So it may not be the multi-million-dollar house swaps for us. For most of us it won't be the multi-million-dollar house swaps, but it will be probably some aspect of our lives. Perhaps it's our jobs, it's our friends, it's our music, it's our foodie interests. We're always looking out for the next thing in one or more spheres, the next experience, instead of stopping to make the best of the next opportunities, and how that might work. So we search in so many different places for this sense of peace and contentment and a way to feel. This is really what is about the subtle agitation, and different ways to relax and to stop these kind of various levels of agitation. It may not be gross, it might be all sorts of different levels to very, very subtle. So a way that we can test that, try sitting still for 4 or 5 hours and see how that feels. And then I think, well, most of us, maybe not some of us, maybe some of you are all great meditators, but 4 or 5 hours sitting still with doing absolutely nothing else and doing our best not to think about other things or what we're going to have for lunch, or when hanging out for a coffee or hanging out for a chai tea or whatever it is that we like. That's quite a big ask. So that, I think, can show most of us that we have this kind of subtle agitation. So according to Geshe in the Path to Enlightenment, he says that while we have this wish for peace and more contentment, and we're looking for it, or deep love, that we don't really know how to find it. So one of the most obvious ways and one of the quickest ways is to develop a really good meditation practice. So it's a key to have a consistent meditation practice. And when we study meditation on calm abiding later in this course, we will research the various forms of obstructions to having a good meditation practice, such as laziness and forgetting, laxity and excitement, non-application, over-application. For example, as an example out of that, and one of the most difficult of the obstructions is excitement, and that's generally defined in Path to Enlightenment as an unsubdued mental factor that is a type of attachment that is led to astray by attractive objects. So we have this kind of excitement when we see attractive objects, and it's a big obstruction to calm abiding, or to that very deep sense of peace that we're looking for, and can be further classified into subtle and gross excitement. So excitement is described by Geshe as the most insidious form of distraction. Because of the strength of desire to enjoy attractive objects, and it is very difficult to control. So it's very hard for us to... So if you're interested in learning more about calm abiding now and want to study it more deeply, then it's on page 789, and it's quite a fascinating study, because we are capable of taking our ability to meditate from a few seconds, if we study calm abiding, from a few seconds right through to continuous meditation without any interruption through the 9 levels and the 9 stages of calm abiding. So it's a great topic to follow up if that is something that appeals to you. You might also want to consider that at Easter we'll be doing an online calm abiding retreat. Tim will be leading that, Tim McKibben, and that's called Clear Mind, Good Heart. So he'll go through all of those different stages and take through different practices. So the real solution is insight and analysis, investigation, illuminating the way that we can find this lasting peace and this lasting satisfaction without any reliance on external stimulation. So if we undertake the right training and aim to see the world through a very different lens, we will be able to cope better with anything. Not only will we have periods of great peace and stability, but our ability to navigate and work in any aspect of our life will improve without any doubt. For example, we can look at if we lose a pet or a family member or a dear friend, knowledge of karma and impermanence will help us to provide a perspective, and this gives us more knowledge and strength to deal with such loss. And it can prevent us sinking into, as some people do, sinking into years and years of sorrow and longing for the return of our loved one or a beloved pet, when that's completely impossible. So instead, another approach might be to acknowledge the sadness of that time, to look after ourselves a bit more at that time, and acknowledge that this is, a transitional time. It's a time of impermanence. It's not so easy. But in general, aim to keep going with the things that are really important as soon as we can, and recalibrate so that we extend and continue our love and care for those of others who are still here, rather than dwelling so strongly on the loss. So Geshe says that the practice of Dharma progressively brings us to more joy and peace and fulfillment. And he explains that the reason for this is because step by step our mind, through the meditation and through the process of listening and thinking and meditating, will progressively gain more wisdom. We may not think it at the time, but we are making this effort to try and understand the mind. And he says that the reason for this is because the mind is a continuum. And both the mental training and the energy of the Dharma practice continue across the days and weeks and years and even into the next life. So any Dharma practice that we do, any reading that we do, any study that we do, any thinking about the Dharma that we do, any meditation that we do, will increase our ability to reach this place of much more joy and peace and fulfillment. So when he talks about the next life, reincarnation has many interpretations in the West, and for those who adopt this concept, theories abound, of course, of who we were and where we were born and the connections that we've carried into the present. But Geshe says that very, very few people have a memory of previous lives. So sometimes we have a feeling that we have, but he said that that's pretty rare. So, if we think back, it's quite hard to remember what happened 10 years ago, let alone what happened in a previous life. Quite hard to remember what was going on when we were really young. Some of us have good memories of when we were really young, but if we get down to the detail. So nevertheless, according to Buddhist thought, we have lived in many, many different places and with many, many different families and different bodies and even different universes. So the continuity of the mind is what underlies this concept of reincarnation. And so each person's mind has its own continuum. So a present mind is a continuation of yesterday's mind, and the mind belongs to the continuum of the mind of the day before, and so on and so forth. And this stretches all the way back to our previous life. And so the Path to Enlightenment explains that mind is beginningless and always depends on the previous moment of mind. So because the mind has its own continuum, it means that it does not arise from our parents. Now, naturally, when we have our parents, they then become another influencing factor on our mind. And future classes later in the year will dive deeper into this fascinating topic. So, for easier reading, or for earlier reading, the theory of process of reincarnation is explained in Chapter 15 on death and rebirth, and Chapter 16 on the 12 links, if you are curious to understand that now more fully, to understand the process of reincarnation and to understand death and rebirth, and that's useful for you. Actually, Nick reminded me that there is a really good addendum to the Path to Enlightenment, and why I'm just going through some of these aspects and little markers where you can dive into the book at different times is because it can be a really helpful approach to the Path to Enlightenment. Don't necessarily need to follow it from the beginning. If we've got a particular interest, we can dive into any different parts of the Path to Enlightenment. And there's a really good guide, and we might want to do that because, you know, we're having we've got a certain curiosity. We also might want to do it because we've got a particular issue that we would like to address, so we might be having a problem. We might suddenly decide that we are interested in making sure that we have plenty of resources in the next life, so we can go on and find out how we might be able to do that in our practices in this life. Or we might be having a lot of impatience and difficulty with impatience in our lives, and lots of issues have come up that have been really hard for us, lots of obstacles have risen, and we're finding it really frustrating. So we can then go and dive into the book and have a look at how to deal with the mind of anger and how we can develop patience. So there's lots of this little attachment to the Path to Enlightenment gives us a bit of a guide through the book, which is really useful. So, you know, to benefit from the practice of Dharma, it is really not essential that we believe in reincarnation. So it's not asking you, the teachings are not asking us to believe in reincarnation, nor the concept of rebirth, nor the 12 links. But there are many, many meditations within this book that will be helpful and assist you, and we can continue these in the meantime. So meditation, as I said before, is a core tool, and we'll explore that in a little bit more depth now. So the definition of meditation means to acquaint the mind with virtue, with minds of virtue and with objects of virtue. And in summary, minds of virtue or objects of virtue are minds that will bring happiness to both selves and others, such as joyous effort and concentration and wisdom and love and kindness and so on. So as Geshe said, each time we meditate, we will bring some more happiness into our lives. And there are very special ways to accelerate that process. So if we look, for example, into the third part of the Path to Enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism, we'll have a really good explanation of the mind of great love and of the mind of great compassion, and also of the beautiful bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment. So then we also have a long explanation of all of the 6 perfections, the perfections of patience, the perfection of generosity, the perfection of ethics and joyous effort and concentration and wisdom. So that is, sometimes people prefer to use that as a starting point, some of those topics that are can be quite a lot easier to come to terms with. So there are two broad categories of meditation, the stabilising and analytical, and the best way to develop our mind is to actually alternate these two methods, to alternate between stabilising and analytical meditation. So single point of meditation is also called calm abiding or absorption, and this allows the mind to relax and be still, and we can give up all other thoughts, as we've experienced already in our breathing meditation and sense awareness, and we can choose any object that we want, but it's often the breath, so it's often a good place to start with. And normally through different associations, our mind is jumping through from one thought to another, and one feeling to the other, and one to the next and the next. So that's what we're going to try and slow down to overcome this too much thinking, where the mind hops around without being able to abide peacefully. So this internal dialogue is quite continuous, and until we practice concentration on one object, it is quite hard to notice it. So when we are more agitated or aroused, what happens is that we can have this continuous discussion and chattering going on that we don't even realise until we begin to do our meditation or begin to observe it. So various stresses, whether it's at work or it's within relationships, aggressive comments that we've received, not getting what we want, or the latest debate that we're engaging in. At such times, it's really difficult to see things clearly. And so that is why developing our regular meditation practice, if possible, every single day, if not, then at least 3 or 4 times a week, is like having a mental hygiene. It's like cleaning up an agitated mind, like we take a shower to clean the body. So we can't really see situations clearly when we're having all this discursive thought that's going on and on and on about subjects that might have concerned us or upset us. And it's really better that we don't make decisions while we're in this state. Often if something's happened and we might write that sort of very full-on email, then we should just pause and not send it. Or we should just pause ourselves entirely until our mind has kind of sobered up or settled down, and all this discussion has stopped, so we can see it very, very clearly. So if we're finding it struggle to meditate, we can go for a long walk, or we can go and look at a beautiful view, so that we can just quieten down, settle down our mind. And maybe if they don't work, then we might listen to some really beautiful music anyway to distract us from this kind of obsessive thought. We've got ourselves in a complete knot about something that's happening at work or something that's happening in our family. So we need to be able to, quite hard to do, not so easy to do when things are really quite hard. So it's quite a big step to make that decision that we're not going to take an action or react or respond when we're in that state. So everyone has a different, internal commentary playing. Nobody's the same, each with their own unique collection of thoughts and difficulties and challenges and preoccupations and tendencies. And the stream of dialogue shapes the way that we experience and deal with the world. So, for example, an example of that would be if we have the mental habit of complaining. That's just a habit that we've developed. Then various, injustices and reasons can complain. Really, they can be kind of lurking around every corner. There are so many reasons to not be happy or satisfied with the situation as it is. And we can continually come up with new and fancy ways to justify our approach if we are challenged. So that would be a mental habit of complaining. If we have like a tendency towards dissatisfaction, we might, continuously chase new experiences and new sports gear and friends and video games, theatre, art, ballet. None of these are inherently wrong. If we have a good reason for doing them, we might just be wanting to gather with family or to exercise or to relax or another good reason. But if there's something that we, find ourselves incredibly agitated and craving for, that is where the difficulty of having this kind of mind of dissatisfaction comes in. If we have a mind that is habituated, has a very strong habit of anger, then we might find ourselves very irritated and annoyed by lots of different things. We might feel quite easily insulted by various people, and we might find, various people's habits quite irritating. So that's because we have a mind that is quite, a little bit fractious and easily irritable. So, repeatedly thinking about other people's faults, that actually might be the result of us ourselves having some sort of issue. So if we find that it may be something that we're really uncomfortable about within ourselves, and even if we aren't admitting to that, so that is a possibility to explore. If we dwell, for example, on unhappy memories and we can't let them go, we find it really difficult to let go of unhappy memories from the past. When people have insulted us or given us a hard time, we can nurture and perpetuate those unhappy memories, and they're resulting in anger and bitter states, and sometimes those, can last a lifetime. When they've been particularly grievous, when we're young children, we can find it very, very difficult to let go of those kind of hurts. So, if we think even about our own response to the COVID crisis, whether it's a mind of irritation with everyone, including the dog, or anxiety or overindulgence in, rich foods or comfort foods, or days and days of watching Netflix and Stan series, we can see some of the frustration that, is played out on social media with all the heavy negative comments and emojis, so that some people, have got really quite anxious and unhappy in that period. Other people have sort of kind of gone, oh, that's great, I can stay home more, I can work from home, I've got so much more time to be with my family, I've got time to do my meditation, time to do study, and have been dealt with it in a really, really positive manner. So, if we have a mind of compassion, the opposite to some of those very negative minds, if we have a really strong habit of compassion and kindness, we will continuously look for ways to be caring and thoughtful towards other people. So, we live in a world of other beings. There are very, very, very few Buddhas, I expect, but therefore naturally, most of the people around us will have negativities. So we could, instead of being kind of, affronted or confronted by people's negativities, we could actually switch that around and decide that we're going to acknowledge that most of us have negativities of some kind or another because we haven't made it to a fully awakened or a fully enlightened state. So therefore, acknowledging that, we might then say, well, let's be compassionate to everybody. That obviously a negative state inherently means some kind of suffering. It actually brings with it, as we've been through, it's some form of suffering is associated with anger, is associated with miserliness, with any kind of tight mind or difficult mind, lack of patience, pride, jealousy. All of those minds are not pleasant minds. They bring an unhappiness, but they might have come from an habituated state. Those negative minds have come from habituated state. So we could decide that instead of being confronted and irritated or, sometimes shocked by people's behaviours, we can in fact feel like, well, those people have, they're just like me. They've got difficulties and they've got challenges, and it is up to me to be patient and to recognise that and to show compassion towards them. And, you know, regardless, at the same time, we can also say to ourselves, am I seeing it right? Am I seeing this situation right? I'm thinking that that is what's going on, but I don't really know what is happening in another person's mind. Is it my mind filter that's making the wrong judgment or coming to the wrong conclusion? So we have to be very careful in our dealings with other living beings, other people. So just like me, we can say to ourselves, they have negative minds and mental afflictions. That brings me to a wonderful story that His Holiness the Dalai Lama told about this old Tibetan monk. And I'm sure some of you have heard it before. It's a very beautiful story though. And he was having an interview with a monk who had been jailed in Lhasa for over 20 years. And His Holiness had already heard that this monk had been systematically tortured and beaten and treated very badly while he was in jail for alleged crimes in Lhasa. And so he inquired to this old monk. He said, well, you know, what happened? What is it that's... The old monk said, oh, you know, I had a terrible time in Lhasa. I had a terrible time in this jail. And His Holiness said, well, he was fully expecting to hear about, you know, the torture and the beatings and everything that had gone wrong. Instead, what the monk said to him was, I was terrified that I would lose my compassion for my captors. So His Holiness was just, you know, completely amazed what a very beautiful mind this monk had developed. To his main concern was he would lose his compassion for those who are, you know, bringing this great suffering to him, this great physical suffering to him. So that's a kind of way that perhaps, you know, we should be aiming, or we could aim to develop a mind that has compassion for and patience towards other people's negative minds, because they're habituated patterns. So, excuse me. So one way to get a sense of our own internal dialogue is to just sit and watch it. It's just to take the time out to sit and actually watch what's going on. There is a meditation called Mahamudra Meditation, which pretty much does that, where we can just sit and watch the mind and see what thoughts, so we don't get caught up with them, don't follow them, just actually observe them like the passing clouds in the sky. And then we get an idea of what is actually going on in our minds. So that gives us a basis and some more energy to want to keep going with our meditation practice, to keep going with our listening and our thinking and our meditating. So as I said before, we don't tend to notice this continuous mental commentary, so that gives us another opportunity to see this chatter and to see how busy our minds really are. And so practicing regularly, practicing our single-pointed meditation will enable us to relax and become more peaceful. And we will then be able to use this clarity and this concentration, this increased clarity and concentration, to meditate on deeper topics through analytical meditation. So what we're trying to do when we're doing our stabilising meditation is to find this kind of sweet point in between agitation and dullness. And the Buddha called it as similar to tuning a guitar. So we don't want to be too chilled or disassociated, and neither do we want this endless commentary. So we don't want to go to one, that's even in our lives. So we can take that experience of the stabilising meditation and also put it into our daily lives and think that we don't want this agitated mind, but we also don't want to be disassociated. So we want to find the sweet spot in between, where we're kind of engaged and focused and trying our best to be kind, somewhere in the middle. So the second form of meditation that is taught in Tibetan Buddhism is analytical meditation, and this is the capacity for logical analysis, and it's an essential tool. And whilst listening to the teachings, we try to act like the gold buyer has done in the days gone by. So we want to they used to conduct 3 tests, whether it was rubbing, they used to rub the gold, they used to cut the gold, and they used to melt the gold to see if it would pass certain tests. So we want to have that kind of apply that kind of energy and focus to also analyse. The Buddha himself said we must check, check, check to make sure that these teachings stack up, and to make sure that we feel there are no flaws in the logic. So we have to rely on our own powers of reasoning rather than someone else. Rather, we don't want to be very careful about listening to every teacher, regardless of how charismatic they might be, or regardless of how clear or appealing the subject might initially seem. It is up to us to actually check it all. And of course then, if we do that, then we will have a very, very deep understanding of the subject as well. And at that point, we can potentially develop this transformational thought and begin to see the world in a new way. So step by step that we begin to get this better understanding of topics like compassion, and like karma, and like emptiness. And once we've arrived at a conclusion, we can then go back to our stabilisation meditation, and it becomes deeper and deeper and deeper because we are just completely focusing on the conclusion that we've come to, and that's where the essence of the transformation comes. So the third type of meditation is visualization, and this type of moving meditation uses a symbolic power of visualized images, and the mind uses imagery constantly to explore and understand our world, and therefore our imagination can be incredibly powerful in helping to develop our mind. So we use it as an influence. And so, for example, if we have a mind that is full of light and we've visualized ourselves as radiant and light nature, that's incredibly energizing, and that brightens our mind. And then there, of course, is we can use any image that we want. We might want to use a beautiful flower, and one great meditator used he used a buffalo horn. He felt that this was a really good meditation object. Many people like to meditate on Shakyamuni Buddha himself. And this is because of the double benefits of increasing our concentration, but also the imprint of the positive qualities that the Shakyamuni Buddha represents. He represents so many different positive qualities, and those qualities are in every part of his body. Every part of his body has a meaning. So, for example, his hands are very long and beautiful, and this is due to his immediate generosity when requested. He has long earlobes, and that is because he is great at listening. He has a long tongue because he has got a very melodious sound and a very beautiful sound. So every part of his body is like that. He wears the 3 robes of a monk. He has a very straight back, and that represents that he has abandoned killing. So there's 32 major marks and 84 minor signs, and every single one of those has a rich meaning. So while we're meditating on this object and we're getting as clear an image as we can of Shakyamuni Buddha, we're developing our concentration, we're not thinking about other things, we're focusing and concentrating on this beautiful image, but we're also getting a kind of a teaching at the same time. We're getting the benefit of the teachings of all of the fully awakened and fully aware aspects of the Buddha's mind that is represented within his body. So it's very pure, it's very beautiful. So then the other really important part, and we'll get on to doing some more meditation, is having a motivation. So the motivation of our meditation practice is really important, and that is because when we make a good motivation, we're not just helping ourselves, We're expanding it to like billions of human beings, like 7.6 billion human beings, and trillions of other living beings. So the merit and the motivation is really having a very powerful and positive effect on our mind at the same time. And then we dedicate, at the end of the session, we give back anything that we have gained, that our mind has gained. And through this giving back, we are also ripening our mind through the dedication process, dedicating the merit with a very pure motivation and with a very pure dedication. They also have very great effect in developing our mind. So let's do some more meditation, and we'll return briefly to our stabilising meditation, and then we'll work today on an analytical meditation, doing the removal of anger and the gaining of patience as examples of what we've been talking about. Okay, so we'll say return again to a nice straight back, and shoulders relaxed, tongue on the tip of behind the mouth, at the top of the mouth, just resting on the upper teeth, so we stop the build-up of saliva. Head slightly forward, just along the bridge of the nose. If it's back like that, then we'll get quite agitated. If it's too far forward, then we'll become quite sleepy. And then we're going to begin by very clearly identifying the object of our meditation, which is the breath. And then we just make a nice firm decision to ourselves that we're going to make the most of this precious opportunity and just focus, or do our best to focus, just on the meditation object. If any other thoughts and sensations arise, we just let them go, we label them, they're just distractions, no remonstrations, no self-criticism, just gently return to the breath. If you want, you can count to 10. If you lose concentration, just return to 1 again. In and out counts as 1 breath. So then we're going to contemplate the disadvantages of anger. So the first disadvantage of anger is it feels very unpleasant. It's agitated, it's associated with tension and stress, inability to relax, and maybe lack of sleep. Secondly, relationships are easily damaged with angry comments that are remembered or can be remembered long into the future. People really don't enjoy being insulted or threatened. Even if there was love and friendship beforehand. Can result in isolation and loneliness. Friction and anger at work can lead to job loss. Third point is we don't look great when we're angry. We often steer clear of a person who looks dark and upset all the time. Anger can cause great embarrassment. It's loss of self-control. Can lead to loss of self-respect. Our reputation is damaged. Angry responses can lead to escalation of problems. Can lead to verbal and physical violence amongst individuals, groups, and whole countries. Somebody has to stop and find a more peaceful way. And finally, irritability, the habit of irritability, can lead to a lot of unspoken dialogue of resentment, criticism and complaint. If we make no effort to control irritability and frustration, in contrast, the beautiful mind of patience is a mind of great strength that can remain peaceful in the face of great difficulty. Patience enables us to remain calm in any situation. We develop the ability to address the issues clearly and peacefully. The great meditator and teacher Shantideva said, if the situation can be remedied, why be unhappy about that? If it can't be remedied, why be unhappy about that? A patient mind is very stable and able to bear any harm without being adversely affected. Patience is not about gritting our teeth and enduring the situation though we hate it. The emphasis changes from a constrained, anxious mind, neurotically guarding against possible harm, to a relaxed, peaceful mind, observing life and creating changes if we can. Fourthly, the intensity of our concern is eased. If we remember that everything is impermanent, we will know the situation will soon pass, and this can ease the intensity of our concern. Fifth, we can remain happy and peaceful, no matter what others say and do. The same way that we cannot cover the entire surface of the earth with leather to protect our feet, we cannot control the external world. But we can cover our own feet with leather. We develop the internal strength of patience, then we can remain happy and peaceful, no matter what others say or do. Our feet covered with leather remain protected from thorns and rough ground wherever we go. Everyone feels comfortable in the presence of a patient person. Peaceful people are trusted and naturally popular. And finally, if we have patience, we can help others control their anger. By not retaliating to their harm, then a conflict doesn't build up with ever more angry responses. You remember again and again the kindness of others. Potentially even the kindness of the person who is currently upset. Maybe this is our turn to make the family, the workplace or the community a happier and more peaceful place to live. If we have thoroughly contemplated anger and then thoroughly contemplated patience, we might develop a feeling that is more peaceful, and we can stabilize and focus our meditation on this feeling of peace. If we do this over and over, then spontaneously, as circumstances arise, we will have a peaceful approach. Then, in recognition of the effort of this meditation in this class, we can dedicate the positive energy we have created towards more happiness in our life, more good conditions, better health, and also happiness and good conditions for the people that we love and for all living beings. And we'll do the dedications. We'll do the prayers starting on page 31. The final prayer of the graduated path. By the two collections' vastest space, amassed with effort for a long time, may I become a chief of conquerors, a guide for all beings whose mind's eye is blinded by ignorance. Also in all lives will not yet come to that. May Manjushri favour me with his compassion, finding the supreme path, complete with all stages of the teachings. May I please the conquerors by practising well, by my precise understanding of the essential points of the path, with skillful means drawn along by strong compassion, and by dispelling the mental darkness of beings, may I uphold the conqueror's teaching for a long time. Where the supreme precious teaching has not spread, also where it has spread but become degenerate, with a mind deeply moved by great compassion, may I make clear this treasure of benefit and bliss. The stages of the path excellently established by the marvellous deeds of the conquerors and their sons, give glory to the minds of those aspiring for liberation. May the conqueror's deeds be long preserved. May all humans and non-humans remove the obstructions and establish conditions favourable to cultivating the excellent path, never be parted for all of their lifetimes from the purest of paths which the Buddhas have praised. When someone makes effort to practice properly the 10 points of conduct of the Supreme Vehicle, may he always be assisted by the mighty protectors, and may oceans of good fortune spread out, reaching all. Then the general dedication on page 34. Yuadi chibokun zonam yeji zozojin zonam yeji lerongwe dambakuni topajo. By this virtue may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit, and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. Changyuzem Yorin Moje Machi Param Chingaji Ipanyamba Mepai Gone Gondu Pelbajo. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. Might have time for one question, if anyone has a question. Or over a cup of tea, if people have time for a cup of tea. Sorry, I've gone over a little bit again tonight. So thank you. Next week's topic will look more closely at some of the stories of the more inspiring teachers of the past. So hope you have a good week, and thank you very much for coming.